Shalom, this is your brother Ibad from True Nation Congregation in Fresno. And we're just going to dust off some of the lessons of the Hasmonean dynasty, even though the Feast of Dedication had passed. But the scripture says for us to study being in and out of season, right? So, Lord willing, through the Spirit, this lesson will be edifying. So let me start off by sharing my screen. Okay. The Hasmonean family was a dynasty of Jews that ruled Judea pretty much during the Second Temple period from the second century BCE. That dynasty originated from the Maccabees, a group of rebels who led a successful revolt against the Seleucid Empire in the second century BCE. The Hasmonean, the family of Mattathias, became known as the Maccabees from the Hebrew word hammer, because they were said to strike blows upon the heathen that were like devastating, like crushing, right? You know, with a hammer, it destroys, but also too, on the flip side, it could build, right? The Jews referred to them as the Maccabees, but the family was more commonly known as the Hasmoneans, right? And through their work and faith, they created this legacy, right? Because I'm just roughly paraphrasing it, but I believe Judas said that we're outnumbered, but our victory comes from God, right? And these are just the valor that our forefathers had, right? When you go to Phineas, right? What he did with the javelin, right? Being zealous for the law. When you go to Gideon, right? When the Most High wanted him to know that it was through having faith in him that he was going to grant that victory. Pick the 300 that drink from the river, right? Having that faith, the original 300, right? Our forefathers, right? So our forefathers, the Hasmoneans, were known for that being rebellious, putting the Most High God first. Whether death was at stake, it didn't matter, because we see many acts of valor, and even too by women. Second Maccabees chapter 7, the woman and her sons, right? That each one was killed, and she praised the Most High God, right? Even when you read about Job, right? He was praying for his own death, regretting the day he was born. But we see, you know, the legacy and the valor that was left for us to be inspired, right? The historical impact, you know, as Hasmoneans dynasties played a crucial role in our history, right? Symbolizing resistance against foreign rule and struggle for religious freedom. Sort of like we're doing this captivity today, right? Because there's going to be a famine of the word, and brothers' videos getting taken down daily. You have to watch what you say. It's monitorized, right? We have to build this cultural memory, just like how they did, right? With their legacy that continue to influence us, right? That kingship, the priesthood, right? That remain a significant symbol of our identity, if you will. So there's just some things we're going to touch on. Okay, let me get to some of my notes right here too. So lucky as I navigate through this. All right. Let me just share this with you real quick. All right. Slovakia. Okay, here. So we have, you know, the key family members, starting off with the father, right? It's like you got babies in the background. That's what we do in Israel, right? We have babies popping off. Okay, so let me get that little family tree, if you will. Okay, here we go. All right. So the key family members would have been Mattathias, the father, right? Followed by his 5 sons. But the main three that led the revolt would have been Judas Maccabeus, followed by his brother Jonathan, followed by Simon. They played crucial roles in this, right? And when you get deep into the scripture and read about it, you see that not only did they take over command with the army, but you have to keep in mind that they were fighting the whole time, right? When Judas Maccabeus was kicking this off, Simon and Jonathan were right there already having experience in war, right? There's just some things we have to keep in mind. Mattathias kicked it off. He led the rebellion, and that was First Maccabees chapter 2, verse 23. And let me get that out. We see a lot of our people out there too, brave, right? But brave for the wrong reasons, right? You might see our brothers getting down by the police all the time, right? One man versus 3 or 4 cops, right? Guns drawn. Our people are brave like that, but we're destroyed for lack of knowledge. We're brave for the wrong reasons. Before we had this community of Israelites where we had to be brave and fight for each other, right? We took care of each other. You even see some instances in, I was watching a documentary in New York, and they was talking about the housing projects were like maybe in the 50s and the 60s. They took care of each other. It was a village, right? Somebody's kid messed up, they could get their butt spanked by another parent. When they came back, told their parent, they'd receive another whipping, right? Somebody was late on the rent, they would have rent parties, right, to help that person out, right? They would open the door for their neighbors, right? But through our curses and drugs, all that's been taken away. So we see that our people were very brave, but now, since we've been destroyed, we're brave for the wrong reasons, right? We brave towards each other, right? We talk loud, chest out, disrespectful towards each other, right? But when you take that and hone it in righteousness, you have examples of our forefathers in the scriptures, in this particular of the Maccabees, right? So let me get to my scriptures. And the scripture says things were written aforetime for our learning, right? So we could look at the temperament of Moses, the bravery of, like what I said, the Gideons, right? Gideonites, if you will, the Hasmoneans, right? And we just look at ourselves, right, and the brothers that we congregate with. And so I often meditate on that, right? Just looking at how our ancestors were and how we are now. But the only difference is, like what I said, we do that outside of righteousness. So let me get to my scriptures. Okay. Here we go. All right. So we're going to go to First Maccabees chapter 2. We're going to take it from verse 23. And it reads, "Now when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was at Modin, according to the king's commandment." So in chapter 1, there was a decree issued to the people that gave them a license, an ordinance to do as the heathen did. So our people, just like today, took a hold of that. Our people today, just like we see when we're coming on the streets and telling them, that today's a Sabbath day. One brother out there said to Bishop T, my money trumps everything, right? They're pretty much walking on the decree of the king's commandment, right? Which would be the so-called ruling governments, right? Presidents, governors, things of that nature, right? That, you know, they hold this bag over our head on the Saturdays, right? And I'll say this too, you know, myself and a few other people used to be on the lunar Sabbath, but through the spirit and history, you see many instances, especially in Roman history, non-biased sources, just authors that study the history. You can see that people are attacked on a Saturday. And through the spirit, when's the funnest day for people to do things? It's on a Saturday. When do you get paid more for work? It's on a Saturday. When most of the sales happen, right? Black Friday until Saturday, right? Because that's that veil that's over our eyes that keep us blinded. And that's the reason why, you know, I myself, you know that Saturday's got to be the Sabbath, right? So let me just get back to my point. You know, we're just talking about the king's decree and his commandment, and our people that are blinded back then as they are now that walk on that commandment, right? And we see our people now having the zeal that Mattathias had, right? But we have to do things in righteousness because our war is not carnal but spiritual, right? We have to have the faith of the Most High to take care of these things. Verse 24. Which thing, when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to shew his anger, according to judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. So this was on sight. This was kicked off by the father, right? And you have to put yourself in the mindset that this father had, right? There's going to come a day where our laws and our statutes are going to be taken away from us, right? And it's like what the Apostle Yasha's song, Martyr, right? I'm a martyr for the Father. That's the type of mentality that we have to have when it comes to this truth and righteousness, as our forefathers did, right? They were in Greek captivity. The altar was being profaned, right? We don't have a temple. You know, our temple doesn't reside in buildings made by hands, but it's spiritual, right? But there's going to come a time where the fishers are going to turn hunters. Verse 25. And it reads, also the king's commissioner who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time and he pulled down. All right. So not only did he kill our people that was looked at as a traitor for defiling the Most High God's laws, but he killed government officials also, right? So that would be equivalent to, like what I said, somebody that works for the government. That would have been a senator or whatever, a policeman, somebody that worked, you know, had straight direct ties to the king. Verse 26, thus dealt he zealously for the law of Yahweh, like as Phinehas did unto Zambri, the son of Salom. So we read that in the tent when Phinehas, he impaled him with that javelin, right? That's the type of zeal that our ancestors had. And verse 27, and Mattathias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, whosoever is zealous of the law and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me. So we're on the streets. That's what we're doing, right? We have that zeal, but we have to have it according to knowledge. Because like the scripture says, our people have a zeal, but not according to knowledge, right? And a lot of that had to do with the Sadducees and the Pharisees, right? That they weren't believing upon the Hamashiach, the Messiah. That's why Paul said that, right? But when we're out there, we have to have that zeal according to knowledge, just as our forefathers did, right? And when you lead this, you have to be blameless in this ministry, because those that teach are worthy of more stripes. When you know better, you're supposed to do better, or else the fall is harder. That's just some things we have to keep in mind. Salakia as I navigate through here. Okay. So we're talking about, you know, how Mattathias kicked it off, which many of us are very familiar with that story, right? But like I said, you know, we always have to go back and If we get the precepts, that's fine. If we get their mindset, their spirit of what all this was going down, right? The three main brothers right here: Judas, Jonathan, Simon. You know, their dad kicked it off, right? To gain that independence, that revolt against the Seleucid Empire, right? We see the dad was inflamed with zeal, you know, a brave man, and he had that anger. We all should be angry that we're in our captivity. You know, the scripture says better to mourn than to feast. These are some things that we have to have in our mind, because our people love to feast. Our people love the hookup, just like my brother Raya told me. Our people love the hookup. That's why there's so much loss in the sauce, in this so-called Christianity in the United Snakes of Babylon, right? They love to hear those smooth words that all I gotta do is show up on a Sunday to be saved. They love the hookup, that they ain't gotta do anything else. All they gotta do is believe and call on the name of Jesus, right? Our people love the hookup. So we get to my next point, right? The independence, the revolt against the Seleucid Empire, right? The reason why the father kicked this off. So let's go to it. Let's go to it. All right, how I get rid of that? All right, bear with me. You see, I'm an Apple phone guy, but a Mac guy, I don't think I am. I don't know if I could do it anymore, y'all. So let me get off the screen. Oh, there you go. All right. So let's get back to the scriptures. We back up a chapter. And we go to 1 Matt chapter 7 and verse 10. Now, some of us read the Maccabees for an assignment, right? But when you dive deep into the Maccabees, man, I'll tell you what you can find. Not only that you find Alexander, the so-called great, or Alexander, what we refer to as the Crete, right? You find that his four generals, Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, Seleucus, the wars that they had, right? The Laodicean war, the drama that was prophesied in Daniel, right? Having to do with Ptolemy, right? And having to do with Bernice, having to do with, I believe, the Seleucids' queen, that the king got married to Ptolemy's sister and got jealous and killed her. And there became a war known as a Laodicean war. Like, when you scratch the surface and get into the children and what was prophesied in Daniel about the children going to war, right? It gets crazy. Not only that there was a civil war, but there was a civil war amongst the kings, from the king of the north and the king of the south, Ptolemy and Seleucus. And that had to do with Ptolemy's sister, which Bernice, getting married to the king of the north, and the king of the north's queen murdering her. So there's a lot of drama in that, but that's a different story. I'm just saying, like, when you go into this, it's not just all about what we read right here, but we have to get into the history of the scriptures also, right? So there's precepts for that. And let me share them with you, if I may. Bear with me. Okay, so and I'm just doing this to the spirit, like what I covered. It was the reason why the father, did that revolt, what kicked it off, right? Profaning the altar. But, you know, diving into the Maccabees, there's a lot of history that's involved in that. So you have to go and dig past the scriptures. And that's in the scriptures for us. So just real quick, let me share that with you, right? So we go to, come on, let's go to Job, right? Boom. And we'll go to Job 8 and 8. whoops. Do this. Job 8. Boom. All right. So when you go to Job 8 and 8, let's see what it says. For inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to search of their fathers. So we look at the way of our ancients, the history that was written, source upon source. You have to have receipts. That's how we find out things of which moon to keep, right? Our feast days, right? The history of our forefathers. So we have to dig into that history, and the book of the Maccabees has a lot of history written about it. Some of that you can read about Josephus. He records some of the things that happened about the Maccabees, right? So we have to look at that. We have to search the ways of our forefathers and the ways of the ancients, right? Let me get one more. Let's see here. Deuteronomy chapter 4. Let's see how you work this thing. There we go. And we go to verse 32. All right. I'm not trying to get too far off the subject, but we have to cover why history is important, right? Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 32. And it reads, for ask now of the days that are past. That's the key point. Which were before thee, since the day that Yahweh created man on the earth, and ask from the one side of heaven unto the other, whether there hath been such a thing as this great thing is, or hath been heard like it. That's the reason why we have to dig into history books. That's the reason why, like, when you read the Maccabees, you're just scratching the surface. You need to have historical sources to go with that, to find out who these generals were, how their wickedness was, right? To Alexander the Great, to his son that was going to inherit the kingdom. But guess what? One of his generals killed his son. Then they took the kingdoms for themselves when he gave it to 4 of them. Then they went to war amongst each other. That you see the way these Edomites were, right? Versus the way our ancestors were. When land was allotted to our ancestors in the book of Joshua, they had to have the faith and they had to go and fight for that land, but they didn't kill each other for that land. You see what I'm saying? When you have this spirit of Edom, where they just want to kill each other off to be the head, leader, right? That's the type of spirit that they're rolling with. And you find that through the history. So let me get back to my point, right? We covered the father. We covered the reason why, the altar was being profaned, and he did something about it, right? Now, we're going to go to 1 Maccabees chapter 1. I'm going to go take it from 7 through 10. And it reads, so Alexander reigned 12 years and died, and his servants bare rule everyone in his place. After his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them. Many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. That's how wicked these men were, right? This type of rulership that was put upon our people, just like today, right? We're so desensitized to what's going on in this country that we don't look at it, right? Polluted water, polluted weather, polluted food, microplastics in everybody, right? Cancer, right? Abortion, drug use, music, media, video games, everything is very wicked right now, right? The evils were multiplied in the earth. Verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So we get a precept for that, right? So this is just, painting a picture. We know the reason why the father did what he did after the reign of Alexander the Great, and everybody knows him about him in the history books, but people that don't have the Apocrypha don't even know that he was written about in the Bible. How would a man, of his stature not be recorded in history and not be in the Bible, right? It's one thing you gotta ask yourself. So let's go to Daniel chapter 11. We let the precepts do the talking, right? Here we go. Daniel chapter 11. And we'll take it from 21 to 35. All right. And this was, prophecy, right? Of Antiochus Epiphanes, the Seleucid Empire, the king of the north, right? And it was the king of the north versus the king of the south. Ptolemy, Egypt, Cleopatra, the white Egyptians, right? Let's dive into this history. All right, so let's go. And it reads, verse 21 through 35, we'll take it. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries, right? What does that sound like to you right now? Just think about it. I'm not trying to get my channel pulled down, but who does that sound like right now? He took and obtained the kingdom by flatteries, right? We're gonna stop World War III. We're gonna deport all these illegal immigrants, all these drug addicts, all these gangbangers, right? We're gonna clean everything up. You're gonna have so much money that you're not gonna know what to do with it. Now everybody that voted for him is losing their job. Verse 22. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflowing from before him, and shall be broken, ye also the prince of the covenant. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall be strong with a small people. He shall enter peaceably upon the fattest places of the province, and shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds even for a time. Verse 25. He shall stir up his power and encourage against the king of the south with a great army. So this is talking about the king of the north, the Seleucid Empire versus the Ptolemaic Empire of Ptolemy, right? And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Verse 26. That's why I said, you have to dive into the history. When you see the four generals, Cassander, Lysimus, Ptolemy, Seleucus, that's when you start getting the history about this. And when you look at this empire, it was pretty big. It was a pretty big empire. Where was I at? 26. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Right? 28. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant. So we saw that, and that's the reason why the father slayed the men upon the altar for it being defiled, right? It was illegal to circumcise your children without having the mother and the infant killed and hanged, that we see in the end of First Maccabees, the first chapter, right? So all this is prophetic. These are precepts of what's going on, right? Against our holy covenant, right? It says his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land. At the time appointed, he shall return and come towards the south, but it shall not be as a former or as a later. For the ships of Shittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do, and he shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. And we read that happening with the Maccabees, right? Verse 31. An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. So this is abomination of desolation that we were reading about in the Maccabees, right? This is like the main parts right here. Verse 32, and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall be corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do not know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. Now when they fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries, right? And that's our people today. That's what they love, the hookup. They love the flatteries. Tell me something good. They love the smooth preach, right? His words were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. Verse 35, and some of them understanding shall fall and try them, and to purge and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. So verse 31 and verse 32 were the key points about the Seleucid Empire, Antiochus Epiphanes and the king of the north, right? So let me get to my next point. We also read too, going back to those four generals and the history, right? That's just something that we have to keep in mind, right? And we spoke about that. That was, that would be the Seleucid Empire. That would be Cassander, Lysimus, Ptolemy, right? That's just some scratching the surface right there, but let's go to it. And that was prophesied in Daniel chapter 11, verse 3 and 4. And we're going to get back to the Maccabees, but right now we're painting a picture, like all this treachery, all this stuff that happened, the reason why our forefathers were getting to that fight. And it reads right here, and a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided towards the four winds of heaven. That's where you have the kingdom of these rulers, the four generals that we talked about. And not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. Right? And we read that those men pretty much a lot of wicked came out of them, that they put all these crowns upon themselves, right? That we read in First Maccabees, right? And they done wickedly. So let's see, let me get to my picks right here. All right. Boom. Right, so all right. So we see right here, your Seleucid Empire, right? You see Ptolemaic Empire, Ptolemy, or however you pronounce that. King of the north, king of the south. That was prophesied in Daniel chapter 11, right? Then you have his other two generals, Cassander and Lysimachus. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's weird, some weird Greek shit or something like that. I don't know. So that's the four generals, the four winds, four directions, north, south. Well, and right here they're kind of east and west of each other too. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So let me get off of that. All right. So we see the prophecy that came to pass, right? About the Father, slay the man upon the altar. That's classic. I get inflamed with zeal when I hear about that, right? The generals that came, right? that was against our covenant, our holy covenant, right? That profaned our temples. Excuse me. The war with the Maccabees started with the Greeks. We just read that. They were prophesied, right? In Daniel chapter 11 about Alexander the Great, the king of the north, the king of the south, right? And we get a little bit more that was prophesied in Daniel chapter 8, verse 1 through 20, right? So let's get that. And let me see if I can find it in a different version. Bear with me, right? Good News Translation. I don't think they got a GNT. Amplified. All right, so let me just go to Bible Hub. See, I hate that I can't have these apps really on the Mac, or maybe I'm not doing it right, but I like the apps because they're a little bit faster on the Mac. Yeah, I myself mainly have to go to websites to do things. All right, GNT. You know, I've been doing the GNT and the NLT for a while with comparative text and translations. I showed the meat, spit up the bones, but they've been some really good translations that I could see, because the number one error in the KJV is the name Jesus. You can see it in Acts when it says Jesus. It's talking about Joshua, about he got land allotted and saved his people, right? But that was Joshua. And also too, his name's also mentioned again during the Maccabees. So there's, errors in different things, but you just have to have the spirit to discern these things, right? So I'm gonna go to, bear with me, Daniel chapter 8. All right. Here we go. Daniel 8, chapter 1. Bear with me for a little bit. I'm taking to verse 20. And the war with the Maccabees and Greeks was prophesied. The book of Daniel prophesies about the abomination of desolation, right? But if you don't have the Apocrypha, you can't put all this together about what happened with the Maccabees, Alexander the Great, and his four generals, right? The kings, the four winds, right? Different areas, north, south, Seleucid, Ptolemy, Lashemicius, or however you say his name, and Cassandra, right? So we're getting some more history of prophecy and the reason why things went down with the Maccabees. And it reads, in the third year, Salakia, Papi! All right, Salakia. It reads, in the third year that Belshazzar was king, I saw a second vision. In the vision, I suddenly found myself in the walled city of Susa in the province of Elam. I was standing by the Ule River, and there beside the river I saw a ram that had two long horns, and one of which was longer and newer than the other. I watched the ram butting with his horns to the west, the north, and the south. No animal could stop him or escape his power. He did as he pleased and grew arrogant. While I was wondering what this meant, a goat came rushing out of the west, moving so fast that his feet didn't touch the ground. He had one prominent horn between his eyes. He came towards the ram, which I had seen standing beside the river, and rushed at him with all his force. I watched him attack the ram. He was so angry that he smashed him and broke his two horns. The ram had no strength to resist. He was thrown to the ground and trampled on. there was no one who could save him. The goat grew more and more arrogant, but at the height of his power, his horn was broken. In his place, 4 prominent horns came up, each pointing a different direction. And that's the 4 generals that we were talking about that was prophesied, right? Verse 9. Out of one of these horns grew a little horn whose power extended towards the south and east and towards the promised land. It grew strong enough to attack the army of heaven. The stars themselves threw some of them to the ground and trampled on them. It even defied the prince of the heavenly army and stopped the daily sacrifice offered to him and ruined the temple. So we have the abomination of desolation being seen. People sinned there instead of offering the proper daily sacrifices. And that's when the Father was inflamed with zeal and struck that man and the government official upon the altar. And true religion was thrown to the ground. The horn was successful in everything it did. Then I heard one angel ask another, how long will these things that were seen in the vision continue? How long will awful sin replace the daily sacrifices? How long will the army of heaven and the temple be trampled on? I heard the other angel answer, it will continue for 2,300 evenings and mornings. During the sacrifices will not be offered, the temple will be restored. Right? So those are different stories, right? But right now we see some of the prophecy that's coming to pass of the abomination of desolation. Right? And it gets really deep. It gets really deep, right? Let's keep going. I was trying to understand what the vision meant when suddenly someone was standing in front of me. And visions and dreams, right, oftentimes can be interpreted, but the scriptures interpret the vision. The precepts interpret the vision. I was trying to understand what the vision meant when suddenly someone standing in front of me, I heard a voice call out to the Ule River. Gabriel explained to him the meaning of what he saw. Gabriel came and stood beside me, and I was terrified that I fell to the ground. He said to me, mortal man, understand the meaning. The vision has to do with the end of the world. While he was talking, I fell to the ground unconscious, but he took hold of me, raised me to my feet, and said, I am showing you what the result of God's anger will be. The vision refers to the time of the end. The ram that you saw had 2 horns representing the kingdoms of Media and Persia, right? So we see some of that, Persian Medes captivity, right? Mentioned 21. The goat represents the kingdom of Greece, and the prominent horn between his eyes is the first king. Right? The 4 horns that came up when the first horn was broken represent the 4 kingdoms, right? And that's what we're talking about. Cassander, Leshamashus, or however you say his name, Ptolemy, and Seleucid, into which that nation will be divided and which will not be as strong as the first kingdom. So this is some prophecy that was spoken about in Daniel about, our temple right here being trampled on, being defiled, right? Then chapter 11 of Daniel talks about Alexander the Great and talks about his generals and talks about the king of the north and the south particularly. So when you go to the book of the Maccabees and you dig into it, you see that there's many prophetic scriptures that had been written that this was going to happen, that was going on during the time of the Maccabees, right? So let me get back to my scriptures. We'll go back to First Maccabees. Right. And we're going to take it from, let me see here. All right. Where you at? First Maccabees. I'm going to go to verse 10. All right. No. I want Salakia. 1 verse 10. All right. So let's get a little bit of this, right? It reads, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, the son of Antiochus, king, who had been hostage at Rome, and he reigned the 137th year in the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that were round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow, right? Just as our people always complaining, just even like it being rescued from Egypt, right? Verse 12. So this device pleased them well. All right, verse 13. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen, right? Lawlessness, right? Whereon they built a place of exercise in Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. So that's gymnasium. When you look at the etymology of that word gymnasium, that means to be like to work out in the nude. I'm roughly paraphrasing that, but you could look at the etymology online, right? No man should look upon another man's nakedness, right? Look at Noah and his sons, right? What happened? Verse 14, where they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the custom of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. Now when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have dominion of two realms, right? And that's what we're talking about, the north and the south. Okay, let's keep going. Wherefore he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots and elephants and horsemen and great navy. Okay. Later on the Maccabees, you read that there was horses flying in the air and shields. It gets crazy if you imagine like flying shields and horsemen in the air. Can you imagine like seeing that? Man, I'm telling you, it gets crazy. Verse 18, he made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt, but Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death, right? That's king of the north, king of the south. Ptolemy was scared. Verse 19, thus they got strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof. And after Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year, and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, as was prophesied in the book of Daniel that we read about in the 8th chapter and the 11th chapter. Let's continue on. Verse 21, and he entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar and candlestick of light, and all the vessels thereof, right? All for spoil, for his gain, right? This is our holy place that's beautiful, that we dedicate to the Most High God, but he profaned it. He took everything out of it. Let's continue on. And the table of the shewbread, and the powering vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold, the veil, the crowns, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. 23. He took also the silver and the gold and the precious vessels, and he took the hidden treasures which he found. And we had taken all away. He went into his own land, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly. Therefore, there was great mourning in Israel, in every place where they were. So you can imagine our people in mourning, right? That word mourning, man, when you read about mourning, you see that our forefathers rent their clothes, ripped it, put ashes, dirt, dung in their hair. That's what mourning was. Imagine your people in that state, and what happens? You know, they're everything's taken away. You put these laws, statutes, commandments, that's taken away. Our people are being traitors. What we see right now, right? They have this alliance with the United Snakes of Babylon, right? What we see them doing right now. But then we're asking ourselves, did I do something? Who's going to do something? You're looking around. Who's going to make the first move, right? Who's going to make the first move? That's what it's always about, right? Even when things going down, who's going to make the first move? I don't like what's happening. Am I going to do it? Who's going to do it? The dad did it. The father did it, right? And that's what we read about in First Maccabees chapter 2, right? Our people made a covenant with the heathen, provoking our righteous ancestors to war, a holy war, right? The faith of Mattathias and his sons kicked it off. They're the ones that are going to do it, right? So let's go. Let's go. Let's go, family. Next chapter, right? And we'll take it from 1 through 7. And it reads, in those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jorib from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. When you read the history of Josephus, I believe that he's somehow connected to that ancestral lineage of Jorib. Just, fun fact out there. Okay? Or I'll say just a fact that you could research, check it out. And he had 5 sons. Okay. This is the translation that we had earlier. John Gaddy, but it says right here, Johanan called Cadis, right? Simon called Dassi. Judas called Maccabeus, the hammer right there, right? Eleazar called Averin, and Jonathan, whose surname was Aphis, right? And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me. Wherefore was I born to see the misery of my people and of their holy city, and to dwell there when it was delivered into the hand of the enemies and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers, right? So we see that kicking off. Everything's going down. The temple's being profaned, right? Now, when you put yourself in this type of situation and you think about it, right? Go back in history, that'd be equivalent to our school being defiled today, right? That martial law is upon us. National Guard's over there right now. They're tearing our school down. Who's gonna defend it, right? We can't keep Passover there anymore. Everything's gonna be taken down. Who's gonna make that first move, right? The Most High put the Spirit in the Father to make that first move, right? With his 5 sons. That's deep right there. That's deep. Let's get a little bit more scriptures. All right. Verse 15. You do a little bit of reading here, so bear with me. And it reads, and in the meanwhile, the kings and the officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city of Modin to take them sacrifice. And when many of Israel came unto them, Mattathias also and his sons came together, so they're getting ready. And he answered the kings and officers and said to Mattathias on this wise, thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in this city, and strengtheneth with sons and brethren. There goes these flatteries. Verse 18. Now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, right? And we read that in chapter 1. To have this covenant with the heathen to profane the temple. Like as the heathen have done, yea, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem, so shalt thou and thy house be in number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. Flatteries, bribery, but these men knew better. When you read later on in the Maccabees, what happened when you trusted them? How did Judas Maccabeus die? The only way that they could kill him was through trickery. Verse 19. Let's get that. When Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from his religion of their fathers and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. God forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion either on the right hand or on the left. That's on point. Let's bring this out. Now, when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was at Modin, according to the king's commandment. When Mattathias saw, he was aflame with zeal. So we read this already, so let's get it again. And his reins trembled. He was pissed off. Neither could he forbear to shew his anger according to the judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. And the king's commissioner that was trying to get them to jump sides, right? To be traitors. Who compelled men to sacrifice, and he killed at that time. And the altar he pulled down, right? Verse 26. And he dealt zealously for the law of God as Phinehas did, but we read earlier, right? And this is where Mattathiah says, he cried, verse 27, throughout the city with a loud voice saying, whosoever is zealous of the law, right, and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me. And he and his sons fled into the mountains. This is where we get the first instances of some guerrilla warfare that was recorded, and left all that ever they had in the city, right? Man, so these right here, acts of valor, a zeal, get passed down. Look at the zealots, the Sicarii, right? The reason why they looked at Josephus as a traitor, right? Kind of being borderline in between the government and on the Jews, right? The Battle of Masada, just some examples, right? We see that the dad led that revolt. That would have happened 167 to 166 BCE, right? That zeal that he had in 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 27, right? Can you imagine that? Crying with a loud voice, saying, whosoever is zealous of the law, that we're taking this down right now. This is what's going on, right? Zeal, leadership. Let's get that. Verse 45 through 50. So see, these are some of the attributes that they have. So when you read this and study this, like, there's just so much angles that you could dissect this in, right? We see the zeal, we see the courage. Now let's get some leadership. 1 Mac chapter 2, verse 45. And it reads, when Mattathias and his friends went round about and pulled down the altars, and what children soever they found within the coast of Israel uncircumcised, they circumcised valiantly, right? This is leadership, that they're taking this, that they're making this tangible. They're manifesting this, right? That's that fruit that you could touch, right? Their actions. They pursued also after proud men and prospered in their hand. So they recovered the law out of the hand of the Gentiles and out of the hands of the kings. Neither suffered they the sinner to triumph. So they got our laws, statutes, and commandments back. They got our scrolls back, right? Verse 49. Now when the time drew near that Mattathias should die, he said unto his sons, now hath pride and rebuke gotten strength, and the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. Now, therefore, my sons, be zealous for the law, and give your lives to the covenant of your fathers. This is leadership. This brave man with his sons kicked it off, and the sons were going to ride with him, ride or die, right? Love you. So, we get the leadership. We had the father, the next one up to lead the revolt, Judas Maccabees, the hammer, right? From 166 to 160 BCE, right? That's what that's when he reigned, right? Known for his strength. Let's go to that. 1 Mac chapter 2, verse 66. And it reads, and as for Judas Maccabeus, he hath been mighty and strong, even from his youth up. Let him be your captain and fight the battle of the people. Since birth, right? How much of us have these sons, or know of a brother or sister that have sons that you just see, man, you know he's gonna be strong. All praises to the Most High. I have, I like to think, one Thassi and one Maccabeus, and the one I call Maccabeus, he hits hard already. He grabs my leg like a two-leg, like in wrestling. He's always trying to do that. He in the garage, he's putting on the gloves, he's hitting things. Then I have my other son, he's very smart, catches on quick. Tile locks don't work for him. He could build things out of Minecraft. That's crazy, and he's barely 4. Man, it's just I see some of these things, right? You see the strength, right? You see the strength of Judas Maccabeus from the youth that is said, right? Verse 66. Even from his youth up, let him be your captain, because it says He'd been mighty and strong, right? These souls are still around here today. And that's the beauty of it, right? You never know who's going to be who. And we have some clues that tell us what our tribe is, but none of us know 100% yet. I'm telling you, it's crazy. It's crazy. So Judas would be known for his strength. He would be the captain, right? Known as a lion as a battlefield. Also, it says that he had been strong from his youth, right? And known as a lion in the battlefield. Let's get that. First Mac chapter 3. All right. Let's go to it. And we're going to read from verse 3 through 6. So he got his people great honor and put on a breastplate as a giant and girt his warlike harness about him. And he made battles protecting the host with his sword. In his acts, he was like a lion and like a lion's whelp roaring for his prey. For he pursued the wicked and sought them out and burned up those that vexed his people. Wherefore the wicked shrunk for fear of him. Man, this Judas Maccabeus was punking everybody on the battlefield. And all the workers of iniquity were troubled because salvation prospered in his hands. It's the Most High stirring up that judgment. He uses people to clean up, right? But this is done in righteousness, known as a lion in the battlefield, right? What else? The rededication of the temple, right? Judas Maccabeus was known for being a captain, being strong from his youth, to being a lion, a whelp roaring for his prey in the battlefield, to rededicating the temple under Judas, right? The father would have been happy, right? The father kicked it off. The son's rededicating the temple. So special to us. It's beautiful. So let's get that. First Mac chapter 4, verse 36. Next chapter. All right. And we'll take it from 36 to 42. There's so much things are written right here that you really have to isolate some of these scriptures and break them down. Because when you try to read this as a whole, there's too much. There's too much to break down, right? All right, so let's get that. Then said, verse 36, then said Judas and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfit, fighted. Let us go up and cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Beautiful. The rededication of the temple under Judas Maccabeus. Upon this, all the host assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Sion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profaned, the gates burnt up and shrubs growing in the courts, as in a forest or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priests and chambers pulled down. And they rent their clothes and made great lamentation, that's sorrow, and cast ashes upon their head. That's how much the brothers were in love with the Most High God and his temple. You can imagine our school being defiled like that, right? It looked like it was shrubs growing in it, like it was in one of the mountains. When the mountains, things are desolate, it's wilderness, right? If somebody was to build a structure out there and nobody's living in it, in a high desolate place, you can imagine what that looked for, that they made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their head. Verse 40, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces and blew an alarm with trumpets and cried towards heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversations, such as had pleasure in the law, right? So I'm telling you, there's just so much things to break down. You could see that the temple is desolate, but right here, like as in the mountains, right? That upon this, all of the hosts assembled themselves together and went up in Mount Sion, right? That they dedicated the sanctuary, right? They chose men of blameless conversation, right? All these are deep things that they're talking about, right? Let's go on a little bit more. And when, as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane. They thought it best to pull it down, lest they should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down. So they rebuilt it and they rededicated it, right? And laid up stones in the mountains of the temple and in a convenient place. In Exodus, you see that when you build an altar, you couldn't fashion or shape any stone. It had to be natural stone. That's going, like, we want to get into the history of the altars. You start going back to Exodus and see how they built the altars, right? There's just so much things that you could break down when you go into the Maccabees, right? So we get to my next point, faithfulness and military skill, right? Let me get back to, right? I think we just might have covered some of this. Oh, you know what? No, we haven't. Let me go back to it. We go previous chapter, verse Mac, and we'll go to verse 14 and 15. And it reads, this is faithfulness and military skill, right? Now when Seron, a prince of the army of Syria, heard say that Judas had gathered unto him a multitude and company of the faithful to go out with him in war, he said, I will get me a name and honor in the kingdom. So we see some of these wicked leaders that see Judas is coming up. He got a name, but I'm going to kill him and make a name for myself. Our people do that today, right? For I will go and fight with Judas and them that are with him, who despise the king's commandment. So the king's commandment, the king, the governments, the princes, that's some of our people's God today, right? Verse 15. So he made him ready to go up, and there went with him a mighty host of ungodly men to help him and to be avenged of the children of Israel, right? And so let's see what happens. His faithfulness and military skill, verse 16, and it reads, all right, so this man's going to try to make war with Judas Maccabeus to get a name, but we see the faithfulness and the military skill that Judas Maccabeus had. And it reads, oh, thank you. Okay. All right, so let's get this. Verse 16. The faithfulness and military skill of Judas Maccabeus, right? And it reads, we'll take it from 16 to 20. Now, when he came near to the going up of Bethron, Judas went forth to meet him with a small company, right? So they're outnumbered, just like the Gideonites, right? Who, when they saw the host coming to meet him, said unto Judas, how shall we be able, being so few, to fight against so great a multitude? And so strong, seeing we are ready to faint with fasting all this day. So if you know what it is to fast or to be hungry, that you're already feeling weak. Verse 18, unto whom Judas answered, it is no hard matter for many to be shut up in the hands of a few. And with the God of heaven, it is all one to deliver with a great multitude or small company. So numbers don't matter. And we knew this through the valor of our forefathers before that, through the time of Joshua, the land being allotted, right? To, like I said, Gideon, the original 300. Verse 19, for the victory of battle standeth not in the multitude of a host, but strength cometh from heaven. So they had the faith that their father had, right? Verse 20, they come up against us in much pride and iniquity to destroy us and our wives and children and to spoil us. But we fight for our lives and our laws, right? Verse 22, wherefore the Lord himself will overthrow them before our face. And as for you, be ye not afraid of them. So things that are written aforetime were written for our learning. We have the bravery, right? We have the experience of Jonathan, the diplomat, right? We have Simon, another diplomat, and he was known for a man of wise counsel, right? So things, they play out in the hand of the Most High. Things are written aforetime, roughly paraphrasing it, were written for our learning. We see the bravery and the zeal. We see the zeal that the father had. We see the strength that Judas Maccabeus had. We see the diplomatic skill that Jonathan had. We see the wise counsel that Simon had. You take these different attributes from these brothers, right, that we learn from, that the Most High did, right, that he gave them this short time for our learning, for the examples, right? Just like the Gideonites were the examples to them, just like Phineas was the example to them, right? Reading between the lines. This is what we're talking about. Most High set up Judas with military skill and intelligence to be so few in number and victorious. The blessing comes from the Most High, was Judas Maccabeus said, right? But our forefathers knew this because their forefathers. Victory comes from the Most High God. Even when the Gideonites had the choice to outnumber their enemy, their numbers were reduced to know that that victory came from the Most High God, right? So let's continue on. The second brother to lead the command will be Jonathan Maccabeus from 160 to 142, known for his bravery. Let me see, get that pic, Slakia. All right. Known for his bravery, in some instances betrayed by our own people, right? Let me see if I could get this out. We see that instance happening in 1 Maccabees chapter 9, verse 58. So let me see if I could find that in this version. All right. Bear with me for a second as we navigate, man. We're gonna get all this. All right. All right. All right, Slakia. Bear with me for a second. See if I can find this. NRSE. Oh, what happened here? NRSE. All right. All right, what's going on here? You don't have it. See, that's what happened. This is what I hate about the Macs versus the iPhones. All right. All right, what do you guys got here? Oh, you do have this. All right, so let's go to 1 Maccabees chapter 9. All right, and if they have it, let's see here. Verse 58 through 71. All right. So we're talking about Jonathan, right? And let's go over it again. You know, he was diplomatic, right? He was known for his bravery, right? And some instances betrayed by our own people, right? And it reads, Then all the lawlessness plotted and said, see, Jonathan and his men are living in a quiet confidence. So let us bring back the Bachides. Let's bring Bachides back, and he will capture them all one night. And they went and consulted with them, and he started to come with a large force. So he was snitched on by our own people, right? And secretly sent letters to all his allies in Judea, telling them to seize Jonathan and his men. But they were unable to do it because their plan became known, and Jonathan's men seized about 50 of the men of the country who were leaders in the treachery and killed them. So Jonathan was betrayed by our own people, as what we see today, right? Best believe that our people are going to be pointing fingers at us when all hell breaks loose, martial law, when things go down, our people are going to do the same. They're doing that to us now. Verse 62. Then Jonathan with his men and Simon withdrew to Beth-Basi in the wilderness. He rebuilt the parts of it that had been demolished, and they fortified it. When Bachides learned of this, he assembled all his forces and sent orders to the men of Judea. Then he came and encamped against Beth-Basi and fought against it for many days and made engines of war, right? So the Edomites were known for making engines of war, especially the Romans and the Greeks, right? But Jonathan left his brother Simon in the town while he went out into the country, and he went only with a few men. He struck down Odomera and his kindred and all the people of Phasaron in their tents. And he began to attack and went into battle with his forces. And Simon and his men sailed out from the town and set fire to the engines of war, destroyed them. They fought with Bachides, and he was crushed by them. They pressed him very hard, for his plan and his expedition had been in vain. So he was very angry at the renegades who had concealed him to come in the country, and he killed many of them. Then he decided to go back in his own land. So right here we see that Jonathan was brave. We see that Jonathan and Simon are still putting in work. Judas is gone, and he was gone because he was tricked. He came with a few men. They surrounded him. They killed him. The father had the zeal. Judas had the strength. Jonathan was a diplomat, and he was brave. Simon was smart. The engines of war were destroyed. They're still putting in work. They killed Bachides, or however you say his name is. They were ratted on by their own people and killed many of them, right? So let's finish this off. When Jonathan learned of this, he sent ambassadors to make peace with him and obtain and release the captives. He agreed and did as he said, as he swore to Jonathan that he would not try to harm him as long as he lived, right? So we see some of this diplomatic skill, right? He restored to him the captives of whom he had taken previously from the land of Judah, and then returned and went back to his own land and did not come again into their territory. So they won this war, and we see, these diplomatic skills and politics. The way politics work is that you always make alliances to when it benefits you, even if it's the enemy. If an enemy of an enemy is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. You ever heard that saying? This is the same thing that happens in politics. You see everybody jumping sides, right? Demetrius, all these other people that come to play later in the book of Maccabees, Bathshides, or however you say his name. I can't even pronounce it right. But we get that diplomatic skill, right? Let's go to First Maccabees chapter 10, verse 1 through 6, and get a little bit more of a picture painted through Jonathan. All right, so come on, all the way down. First Mac, chapter 10. Right, we get it from verse 1 through 6. And it reads, the revolt of Alexander Epiphanes, right? In the 106th year of Alexander Epiphanes, the son of Antiochus, landed and occupied Ptolemais. They welcomed him, and there he began to reign. When King Demetrius heard of it, he assembled a very large army and marched out to meet him in battle. Demetrius sent Jonathan a letter in peaceable words to honor him. There goes him. Man, this is what the Edomites do. Look, it's flatteries again, right? And you see that this king is sending peaceful words to Jonathan to make this alliance. And this is where this diplomatic skill comes in, that he's playing the politic role, right? Verse 4, for he said to himself, let us act first to make peace with him before he makes peace with Alexander against us. For he will remember all the wrongs that we did to him and his brothers and his nation. So Demetrius gave him authority to recruit troops and to equip them with arms and become his ally, as he commanded that the hostages in the citadel shall be released unto him. Right? So we see the diplomatic skills, that they're making these alliances, formulating these strategies, right? Let's get one more example. First Maccabees chapter 12, verse 1 through 4. There's some of the diplomatic skills. This is what the Most High is showing us, that Judas was a hammer, that he was smashing the enemy, that you had to be smart and witty and form these alliances sometimes. Uphold your laws, statutes, commandments, right? But you have to be smart on the way you move things, the way you move. Every step has to be calculated. You have to calculate the cost before you do something, right? 11. Come on. All right, let me go to 12. There it goes. Another example of Jonathan's diplomacy, right? It's written all through the scriptures, but a lot of us, we miss these type of things when we're just reading and don't pay attention to the type of mindset that our forefathers had, right? Here we go, 1 through 4. Alliances with Rome and Sparta. And it reads, now when Jonathan saw that the time was favorable for him, he chose men and sent them to Rome to confirm and renew the friendship with them. And we were enemies, right? He also sent letters to the same effect of the Spartans and other places. And we were just going to war, right? Like, man, with everybody. So they went to Rome and entered the Senate, and Chambers said, the high priest Jonathan and the Jewish nation have sent us to renew the former friendship and alliance with them. The Romans gave them letters to the people in every place, asking them to provide for the envoys safe conduct to the land of Judah. That's right there, man. I'm telling you, the Maccabees family, whew, I say like the Maccabees, my favorite book. God, you know, there's so many. One of my top books, right? So Jonathan was known for his diplomatic skill, right? Political game, right? Politics is a game with alliances and strategy, right? A chessboard really coming into life, right? That the Most High is showing us, right? With the attributes from these brothers, right? So we get to the next brother for leadership. That would have been Simon, right? Known Simon Thassi, right? From 143 to 134 was his reign, BCE. Simon is known for his wisdom that we get in First Maccabees chapter 2. So let's go to that. All right. Previous chapter. And we're going to get it from verse 65. And it reads, and behold, I know that your brother Simon is a man of counsel. Give ear unto him always. He shall be a father unto you. Simon is a wise man, right? That he's known for his wisdom, right? But that's not all he's known for. Keep in mind that all these brothers were fighting together the whole time, right? Bravery, right? Valor. Let's get that. How do I navigate here? Oh, here we go. 13. And we're going to get it from 1 through 7. And it reads, now when Simon heard that Tryphon had gathered together a great host to invade the land of Judea and destroy it, and saw that the people was in great trembling and fear. You imagine that? Man, it's a lot of pressure to be a leader. Even a spiritual leader, there's a lot of pressure on you. There's a lot of things that you have to weigh out. You have to put your own personal feelings to the side and do what's right. And it reads, he went up to Jerusalem and gathered the people together and gave them the exhortation, saying, ye yourselves know what great things I and my brethren and my father's house have done for the laws and sanctuary and battles also, and troubles which we have seen. By reason whereof all my brethren are slain for Israel's sake, and I am left alone. Right? Now, therefore, be it far from me that I should spare my own life in any time of trouble, for I am no better than my brethren. His brother's getting killed, right? But he's still having this courage to go on and fight, that my life is no better than my brother's, right? He knows that death is on the horizon. Verse 6, doubtless I will avenge my nation and the sanctuary, our wives, our children, for all the heathen are gathered to destroy us of very malice. Now as soon as the people heard these words, their spirit revived. So when we have strength, valor, bravery in these scriptures, people come to us for that comfort. That's what these scriptures are, right? That, like I said, things written aforetime were written for our learning. That this man was smart, a wise counsel, and brave, right? Also, too, with that diplomatic wisdom, right? Just like his brother Jonathan, right? So we get that. First Mac chapter 14 and verse 4. Let's get a picture painted real quick. It's 4. His brothers are gone. Can you imagine that? You know what I mean? Like, man, you got to just get deep into this when you're reading this, right? It reads, and as for the land of Judea, that was quiet all the days of Simon, for he had sought good for his nation in such wise as that evermore his authority and honor pleased him well, right? And so that's that wisdom, these diplomatic moves that he was making, seeking peace for his nation, right? Expanded territory, verse 6. And enlarged the bounds of his nation and recovered the country, right? Expanding our borders, right? Political alliances also. Next chapter, First Mac chapter 15. And we'll get it from verse 15 to 21. All right. This is very important. It's very important for us to use wisdom. This is what the scriptures is showing us. 15 through 21, and it reads, In the mean season came Nemunius and his company from Rome, having letters to the kings and his countries wherein were written these things. Lucius, consul of the Romans, unto King Ptolemy greeting. The Jews' ambassadors, our friends and confederates, came unto us to renew the old friendship and league. How are you going to renew your friendship? This is all a bullshit game, but you have to know how to play it, right? Being sent forth from Simon, the high priest, and from the people of the Jews. And they brought a shield of gold and 1,000 pounds. We thought it good, therefore, to write unto the kings and countries that we should do them no harm, nor fight against them, their cities or countries, nor yet aid their enemies against them. So these are the alliances that they have, right? It seemed also good to us to receive the shield of them. Therefore, there be any pestilent fellows that have fled from their country unto you, deliver them unto Simon the high priest, that he may punish them according to their own law, right? That's punishable by death. That's punishable by death, right? We see these diplomatic skills for the peace of our people, expanded territory, political alliances, right? We see all that happening with different brothers, right? Man, I'm telling you. So, let me get back to where I was real quick. Oh, what's Slovakia? Oh, Then getting better at this thing. All right. So, sum it up. We had Judas the Hammer, 166 to 160 BCE. Right. The Holy War was kicked off the zeal of the father, Mattathias. Right. The Hellenists try to destroy us with their Greek culture. Right. Jonathan Maccabeus from leadership from 160 142. A political and religious leader that maintained our religion and our culture, our laws, right? Followed by Simon Maccabees, 143 to 134 was his leadership, right? Served as our high priest and ruler, right? Gained our regained our territory and expanded our territory, right? Here's just some of the things that we have to sum it up with our forefathers, right? Like you. There's just so much things that you could dive into when it's coming to the Maccabees, right? And right here, this book, History of the Hasmonean State, it's a good read, right? So we get a little bit of insight on that, right? Our forefathers. The Hasmoneans, the Jewish family that fought the Seleucid rulers that we saw prophesied in the book of Daniel, right? During the mid-2nd century BCE to create an independent Jewish state for our laws, statutes, commandments, our freedom, right? Which at first, they governed as its political leaders and high priests, and then its kings. It was a Hasmonean family religious zeal that the father had, then we slew the man upon the altar, right? That brought them to power and which helped them maintain an independent state for nearly 80 years, right? So we see there's some descendants of theirs, of Simon Dassey, right, that try to play this political game, but it backfired on them. So the Most High, like, man, I'm telling you, things written aforetime were written for our learning, right? That we have the zeal, that we have the strength, valor, sometimes violence that comes with it, right? Diplomatic skill, political skill, right? But when you look at everything, the zeal of the father, the strength of Judas, the leadership of Jonathan, right? His diplomatic skill, the intelligence that Simon had, right? But when you start running to the enemy too much for help, things are going to backfire for you on that. And we see that with Herod, right? What he did to, I believe, some of the last of the Hasmoneans that were in rulership, right? Also, too, we're talking about the father, right? And First Mac chapter 126 that we read, that he burned for zeal for the law, right? Just as Phineas did against Zimri, the son of Salu, right? That we read in the Old Testament in the tent, right? His fiery temper erupted when officials sent by Antiochus Epiphanes arrived in his village with the order that everyone offer a public sacrifice according to the Greek fashion, right? And that's what they're trying to do, is kill us with their culture, right? When a Judean, which was a traitor, approached the altar to comply with the imperial edict, Mattathias killed him and the royal official before destroying it. And he called upon all who were zealous for the sake of the Torah. We uphold the covenant to follow me, and they regained that back, right? Mattathias and his sons enforced the law upon their fellow Jews. Second, since Phineas and his descendants received the high priesthood because of their zealous acts, right? The writer of First Maccabees appealed to this tradition to validate the actions of the descendants of Mattathias, who served as a high priest. Mattathias appealed to strict Torah observance, which included the forced circumcision of the sons of those Jews who had obeyed the Seleucid prohibition against the circumcision, forced the basis for his opposition and the Seleucid rule. So we see in Samuel that obedience is required over sacrifice, right? That why was this circumcision forced? You can't keep the Passover without it, right? You can't receive these blessings that the Most High has for you without being obedient, right? It's not for his personal gain or rule, it's for the Most High's, right? According to First Maccabees chapter 2, verse 48, through such violent acts, he and his followers saved the Torah from the land of the Gentiles. They got it back, right? His example of religious zealotry and his military resistance became the foundational ethos of an entire Hasmonean dynasty and would later serve as a model for zealots who opposed Rome. And we saw that when we talked about the zealots of Sakari and the Battle of Masada, right? That they looked at Josephus being a traitor. Judas was the oldest and most famous son of Mattathias. He assumed leadership of the revolt immediately after his father's death and quickly achieved renown as a warrior and military commander, right? The author of 1 Maccabees 3, chapter 1, verse 9, recounts his valor and portrays him as a savior of his people. In 164 BCE, he captured Jerusalem, cleansed the temple, and celebrated with the festival of Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication. After Judas died in battle, his brother Jonathan took over. And that's what we're reading about, right? Of the rebellion. It was during his reign that the Hasmoneans began to negotiate with their former Seleucid foes. And that's what we're talking about, that politics and those diplomatic skills, right? To bring stability to their fledgling kingdom, to win both political recognition and higher offices from the kingdom. The family's unique combination of religious zeal and politics acumen proved to be the greatest strength and allowed them to create a small state amidst larger hostile powers and maintain independence for nearly a century. That's at 70 to 80 years, right? Well, all this couldn't be done without their faith, valor, and violence, right? Jonathan, right? What his political examples with Demetrius amongst Rome, right? Let's get some of that. Jonathan took advantage of the turmoil caused by the new civil war between Demetrius II and the pretender Tryphon, which greatly weakened the Seleucid Empire to increase the power in Judea. Tryphon had no authority to govern in his own name. Rather, he exercised the power through the boy prince Antiochus. See, he was a faker, right? Antiochus VI, Dionysius, who he had kidnapped. At this time, the Hasmonean family realized that no single monarch was powerful enough to rule securely over the entire Seleucid Empire. The two contenders for the throne of Syria likewise recognized they needed outside help to retain power of a portion of Syria. And that's where we have some of those political alliances that we read about in First Maccabees, right? When Demetrius II took action first, he gave Jonathan significant land concessions and ordered the removal of the Seleucid garrisons from Jerusalem in exchange for Hasmonean troops to fight for Tryphon. Jonathan supplied troops to help Demetrius II subdue a revolt in Antioch. Now confident that he would defeat Tryphon alone, Demetrius reneged on the promises that he made to the Hasmoneans. Jonathan subsequently switched sides and backed the young Antiochus IV, whom he had kidnapped, right? So this is, like I'm telling you, there's a lot of drama that you read about that comes when you read the Maccabees, right? The political alliances that they had, and amongst that, from the civil wars with their children, Aristobulus, John Hyrcanus, things of that sort, right? You just have to dig deep into that, which is another lesson. And it reads, Tryphon let not Jonathan keep all the privileges Demetrius had given him, including the office of high priest. He also appointed Jonathan's brother Simon the governor of the coastal area from the ladder of Tyre to the borders of Egypt. Jonathan also sent an ambassador to Rome to renew the treaty with the Roman Republic his brother Judas had made. It was at this time that Jonathan made a momentous decision that he would affect all his successors to help lead the creation of an independent Jewish state, right? That's that independence. Get our laws, statutes, commandments back, get our land back, right? We see what the father did. We see what Judas did. We see what Jonathan did, right? that political alliance with Rome that we read about in First Maccabees. Um, man, it's telling you. Let me continue on reading. Because the Seleucids were no longer reliable allies, the Hasmoneans were forced to seek some relationship with the Roman Republic. An enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? To ward off the further Syrian incursions into their territory, Jonathan decided to a further Syrian of Salakia. Jonathan decided to follow the example of his late brother Judas and sent a delegation to Rome to renew his family's treaty. His mission to Rome was in 144 BCE. Rome, man, I'm telling you, like we know who Rome was, the iron in that statue um that Daniel broke down, right? Man, to make that alliance with Rome, Rome was strong. You had to be somebody for Rome to deal with you. Other than that, they wasn't dealing with you, right? Let's get some background on Simon. Simon had a long record of military leadership by the time he became his nation's high priest and political leader, right? The first king and high priest, because back then you couldn't combine the two, right? It's something that we know by just by reading, right? Like when David was a king, he had his high priest, right? Um, Simon, we read about. He had a lot of military experience before he became a leader and the nation's high priest, right? And First Maccabees chapter 2, verse 65 responds that Mattathias once said to his sons, Behold, your brother Simon, I know he is wise in counsel. Always listen to him. He was known for his wisdom, right? He shall be your father. The story may have been created to counter the later opposition to his family consolidation of political and sacred powers by tracing Simon's authority to his Salakia. Simon's authority to his father, the famed Mattathias. It was because Simon had fought the Seleucid rulers since the beginning of his family's revolt that he came to be accepted as Jonathan's replacement, right? So this man was built for the task, right? That when we read that they came into power, you can't forget that they've been fighting since day one with their father. He had many years of experience by the time he became a ruler, right? Then it says, he was, moreover, a competent military commander. He and Jonathan had led forces together. Antiochus IV had even appointed Simon governor from the ladder of Tyre to the borders of Egypt. Bar Kova observes that Simon appeared to have been in charge of an early campaign when he had cavalry against the Seleucid forces. Simon was clearly qualified to lead his nation's military, which was deemed an essential precondition at the time of the Hasmonean rule. So, with that, we covered a lot having to do with the Hasmoneans, with the father, Mattathias, Judas Maccabeus, Jonathan, Simon, what they were known for, right? That when I'm telling you, like when you read these scriptures, you barely scratching the surface. Keep rereading them, right? Oh, I see that the feast of dedication. I see he slew the man upon the altar, right? I see Antiochus, Epiphanes. I see the four generals mentioned in Maccabees chapter 1. I see Alexander the Great, right? But when you start just reading more and more into it, right? The circumcised babies that they were killing, right? The profaning the altar, us getting everything back with the mindset of our forefathers were. It is just, man, it's just awesome inspiration to us all based off what our forefathers were like, right? And Lord willing, this was edifying. This is your brother Abad from True Nation Congregation of Fresno, and with that, I am out. Shalom.